Indian subcontinental culture, as far as I recall, the idea of property was more like communal. Even if you look into the shared cropping that we have, or all those economic structures that we had back in those days, even in the early 2000s, because I'm from a very rural background, all those things stand out as a different form of perception. And with the freedom that they have earned, gradually started kind of a gradual Europeanization of our culture and everything. And as such, even the idea of freedom has sort of evolved to be pretty much based on the idea of like land and nationhood and as such. And in that sense, if we think about it, like we got killed for the discovery of the very thing that they define as freedom, which was taken away from people to some degree. And now what we have gotten in return is not really freedom, is pretty much more related to like individualism and all as such, because you need to have property, we need to have some sort of status and all those things, though they were there in the agrarian era. I have to accept that, we have to agree with that, but this is not what freedom really meant for us. And if you look into the narrative that we have, that widely circulates in social media these days, is like it is an encounter a fisherman has with a rich man. The fisherman was relaxing in the shore of a river or sea, if I recall correctly, and then he was proposed by a rich man who tells him like, "Oh, why don't you buy a boat or something so that you can double your income?" And as such, it didn't start like this, but it started like, "Oh, you're relaxing now. Why don't you work double the time that you have been doing, and then you could do this, and then at one point you could buy a boat, then you'll double it, and as such, and at one point you'll not have to work after after that you could retire, and as such, all those things, right?" But that person, I mean, that narrative itself is how we feel freedom, right? Um, to that extent, I'm referring to is that the person was relaxing and working, and he was happy. He was doing what he wanted to do, right? He didn't have to worry about some sort of future retirement plan. But with this European intervention, our perception of self and everything kind of got shattered so much that we started thinking about retirement plans and saving money, or kind of doing more and more and more and as such, and as a result it started entering into some sort of competition that really doesn't define us at all, because you become more like a robot or something that wants to work up to a certain period, and then that's it. Now we call these people those who do not work or do relax a lot and then work in intervention. We call them bhobogure, right? In our Bengali language means like bohemian. And then we no longer see a lot of them because this is what we have had in even in my childhood. So the idea of freedom that European nationalism has introduced to us is pretty much binding us into some form of identity and giving us some sort of property and status ideas. Those really define us in some ways that, to some degree, takes away our perception of peace, and then we need to sacrifice our lives for freedom and as that. I mean, if I think about it this way, then a lot of problems that we face these days are pretty much related to the idea of nationalism and sacrifice and all those things, and then we blame people for becoming, say for example, terrorists or whatnot ever, or even if somebody is going far right and as such, uh, because they're doing something wrong, and we do not critically engage with the idea of what the West implanted as an identity perception, but we just go ahead and blame the byproduct, not questioning the product or the baseline or the root cause that kind of generates all those issues. So this is where it is really hard for a lot of us, and then we have to fight for the freedom, you know, from time to time, and sacrifice our lives, and then see it trampled by another regime. It is how it is, right?